This program is made possible in part by a grant from the Blumenthal Foundation and also by the Charlotte Museum of History. Also by viewers like you. Thank you.
Since the beginning of time, storytelling has explained our existence, preserving cultural history and honoring our ancestors. The repetition of these personal accounts engenders a powerful connection to who we are and why we are here. Personal Legacies, Surviving the Great Depression, utilizes sights and sounds along with those stories to add living color to the black and white facts about the Depression era. My name is Robin Edgar, and I recently had the wonderful privilege and opportunity to interview close to 100 individuals who lived in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area during the 1930s. Working on an exhibit for the Charlotte Museum of History, I hope to discover secrets to financial security. Although I heard advice about strong work ethics, as well as saving money and not spending what you did not have, the universal wisdom that I gleaned from those stories took me quite by surprise. I discovered that the prevailing keys to survival were not what you could buy, much less accomplish on your own. October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday marked the infamous day when the stock market crashed and the Great Depression sank its ugly teeth into our economy. Banks closed, cities laid off workers, and businesses and farmers could not sell their wares. Many, losing all they had, took their lives. Others rolled up their sleeves and made do. In fact, hearing their personal accounts, they did more than survive. They thrived. 4 themes emerged from their stories: standing together as a community, working through the hard times, having faith to carry on, and making do with what they had. Extended families, close-knit communities, and neighborhood congregations recognized that everyone was in the same boat. To prevent it from sinking, they forgave debts, watched each other's children, shared food and clothing, and took people into their homes and looked out for one another. What appeared to keep everyone going during those hard times was not the accumulation of wealth, but rather the sharing of what they had.
I had a large extended family.
So you all looked out for one another?
Yes, we looked out. Our grandparents were very good to us, and I had an aunt and those great aunts, and they helped us. Other members of the family helped with the other children because, as I say, my father's salary was never very large, and there were 4 of us.
My mother worked side by side with my father on every weekend, and it was a struggle, but they kept it going.
My father was not able to get advanced education. He was one of 17 children, and everybody had to go to work pretty early on.
We had relatives that supported us.
I had an uncle that was a supervisor at Highland Park Mill number 3. His name was Jesse also. And he got Mother a home, a place to live. I don't know, I think the rent was something like 25 cents a room or whatever, and we had actually a 4-room house on North Myers Street. And I stayed there until I was 10.
My father had some friends from the city who loved to hunt, and they came out and would hunt quail. And we boarded their hunting dogs, as a matter of fact. They would bring us out a crate of oranges, a whole bunch of bananas, all sorts of fruits and nuts and veg and things like this.
Occasionally there would be somebody that they would call a hobo. Whether they were or not, I don't know. But they'd drop by, and there was always something you could feed them, give them something. My grandmother was big on that, and my mother was too. But my grandmother was Irish, and, we shared with everybody.
And my mother would always share with people who would come to the door during the Depression, asking for things and food. And so we learned to do that. My parents would always think about other people and their relatives in Georgia who didn't have as much as we had in North Carolina. My father was always caring about that. It made me begin to realize that I had a reason to be thoughtful of other people and to participate in community services and to give out things and myself.
Everybody helped everybody. And when I was a kid, I was the only child. So I didn't have the problems maybe others did. But we didn't know that we weren't rich. We had no idea there was a difference between us. Just one guy worked harder than another guy probably, but there was a love in the mill village. And today that love still exists between people that lived and were raised in mill villages. They all still care for each other.
When I came back to Charlotte, I had several friends that knew I was looking for a job, and they put me in touch with a bank in Charlotte that was going to have to liquidate some frozen assets up in Asheville. So I was in Asheville for a year trying to collect money from people that didn't have it. And it was a rather depressing time, but turned out to be the best time of my life because that's where I met my wife.
We had great family values, although we thought we were uppity and rich, but we were at the bottom of the economic ladder. We were taught survival skills, how to save, how to be courteous to each other, and as a result of that, people in the neighborhood took real watch over us because they didn't want any child to go unchastised.
My dad was a softie. Not really, but he loved people. And there was, during the Depression, there was a few families that came in, and they had a number of children. And I remember one particular instance is that this family, the father came in and he needed shoes for his children, and it was going to scrape out everything that he had, and he didn't have money for heat or for groceries. And my father said, just fit the children up and we'll just keep tabs of it. And someday you can pay me. And that family still trades with us today.
During this era, there was a prevailing work ethic to do what needed to be done. All ages pitched in to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. Shopkeepers worked long hours. Farm families banded together to reap and mill their crops. Young boys sold newspapers, mowed grass, and helped peddle wares, while the girls kept house, minded younger siblings, and tended gardens.
My job was to get the wood, the kindling, as they call it, and I helped out by doing that when I was a little boy.
I used to go downtown, and I got myself a route of selling Liberty Magazine, Life Magazine, the different magazines. And I used to make maybe $4 or $5 a week.
One of the first jobs I had was working on an apple truck. We would go through rich areas, affluent areas, and sell apples at 25 cents a peck.
And how old were you?
I was about 8 years old at that time. And we'd get 5 cents for every peck of apples that we sold. And sometimes people would give us a quarter and then take the apples. So that means we were rich then. So we made 80 cents a day. We were in good shape.
They had let all the other accountants in the office go except me. I was there because I was the lowest paid one. And the 15th of February, they said goodbye to me, gave me a couple of weeks' pay. And the Veterans Administration was paying off a World War I bonus. And I worked at the Veterans Administration from 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock till 8 o'clock at night. A drugstore where I'd made an audit for the accounting firm had gone broke and was in the hands of a receiver, and they needed a bookkeeper. I kept books down there from 9 o'clock in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. And one of the owners of North of Trine Drug had opened up Park Place Pharmacy. And he needed a bookkeeper and needed somebody to teach his daughter how to keep books, and I did that on Saturdays and Sundays. Well, for 3 months, I was just as busy as could be.
I would take my shoe shine box, the old fire station up on the corner of Graham and Fifth Street, also the Dixie News Company, and also the Buick place was right around the corner, right opposite Western Auto, and then right behind Western Auto was Little Canary Cottages, which was a hamburger franchise in the Charlotte area, and leave my shoe shine boxes there. The firemen or the policemen or the mechanic, they would shine their shoes, put the dime in the container. I'd go back on Saturday morning, replenish that, wash my shine rags, and then wait and go back the next weekend.
My father decided that he wanted to be back in the shoe business, and that's how he came to Charlotte. He decided he didn't like the department store business. He wanted to concentrate on footwear. So he ended up buying two stores. One was called Herbert's, and the other was called Lebo's. He had three other stores beside those two. But then the Depression came along, and he went down to one, and he was lucky to survive. My dad worked almost 7 days a week he couldn't hire too many people. He didn't hire, in fact, he only had one other person working with him during the Depression in the store. And my mother used to bring down his lunch because he wouldn't even spend a nickel or a dime to buy a lunch.
And I can remember walking from one end of Franklin Avenue to the other end, passing out handbills. And as a reward for that, you got a lunch. You got a can of Vienna sausage, you got a honey bun, and you got a little carton of chocolate milk.
Each one of us always had chores to do. We were responsible for varying things, feeding chickens, setting out tomato plants, hoeing cotton, and all of those things. We all had to do that in order to survive.
An inherent belief in God helped make mountains into molehills. Congregations looked after the needy, tent revivals inspired people to have faith, and families that prayed together stayed together.
I'm a strong believer in God. In fact, I live right next door to the church. I didn't live in the Greenville section. I didn't live really on the street. I lived in the alley, and that was a passageway.
And we were close to the church, and we'd always walk to the church. And then back then, being my parents were from Greece, and most of our friends we were associated with were speaking the Greek language. So we went to Greek school in the afternoon to learn the language, so we could converse.
We had good relationships with the church. The church was the main area for activities and events. We'd have sack races and all kind of little races and games. And we grew up in that particular area and very fond of the leaders in that church.
My father took a very big interest in attending the services, and he was involved in when they moved the 7th Street to Dilworth Road and built the synagogue there. He was, in fact, on the building committee. He was on the board of directors for many years, and so he was very involved in raising money for the synagogue in order to build it.
We had plays that we would be in, and then we would attend Sunday school, and that's the reason I think we were all very close to the church, because they helped us survive.
People simply did what they had to do to get by. They picked creasy greens for meals and made Hoover buggies from defunct cars in order to get around. Many sewed their own clothes and put cardboard in their shoes to make them last. Even on the tightest of budgets, families found ways to prepare meals, entertain themselves, give gifts, and even manage to send their children to college.
I desperately wanted to go to college because my dear friend Margaret was going to college, and my mother just could not. So I borrowed money from my brother-in-law and went to Presbyterian Hospital Nursing School. I borrowed $50 from him. And I still have a receipt. When I was gainfully employed as a graduate, I paid it back.
The old money was almost a sin. My job when I came back from Asheville was $40 a week, and that was a good paying job. But I hadn't been working long before I got a 10% salary cut, $36 a week. All of it is relative because our apartment rent was only $35 a month. And my wife took $5 and bought groceries for the week and bought paid for the milk, which is delivered to the door, and paid for laundry, which was the towel sheets and things like that that were.
Because you didn't have a washing machine.
Didn't have a washing machine, didn't have a dishwasher. We had an upstairs apartment in a four-family apartment building. It was hot as the hinges of Hades.
We lived in a little 3-room house, which later we learned it was called a shotgun house. It means you could aim a shot. When you look down a shotgun, you look dead through the barrel. When you look through the shotgun house, you look in the front door and dead out the back door. And but the rent was like $1.50 a week, and my father was only making about $6.50 a week.
I never knew until I was quite mature that my grandparents weren't rich. Because they knew how to make the best of what they had.
My mother was one that my dad used to give her a certain amount every week, and she used to have little pocketbooks, little pockets in her pocketbook, which she would divide up so much for the electricity, so much for this, so much for food, so much for clothing. And she was a penny pincher, but I'll tell you one thing, she always had money for something, that whatever we needed.
We kept a strict account of every penny that we spent. We put it down every day. At the end of the week, we'd add it up and transfer it to a monthly sheet. And that way we got started off on a fiscal system that worked all right for us.
My mother had to make over, actually, some of the clothes that I wore to school. And I was so envious of my dear friend Margaret Winchester, who had this pretty camel-haired coat. And I just envied her that coat and would borrow it on any occasion I could. She was very generous with that.
Mother would take us uptown for Christmas shopping. That was one of the big events, was to go look at the windows uptown, see the colored lights, and go to the stores and do our Christmas shopping. All of the Christmas shopping was done in the dime stores. And I remember, I think I told you that I would spend a nickel on everybody but my mother and father, and I would spend a dime on their presents.
My mother saved money and bought fabric and made me a lovely print pink dress for graduation. And we had, in those days, the senior class would put on a play, and you had to pay $0.25 to get into it. And I wanted to go to this so badly because many of my friends were included in the cast of the play. My mother actually did not have 25 cents to spare, so I didn't get to go to that.
Cassie and I lived next door to each other on Crescent Avenue, and we would go to the Saturday morning matinees in uptown Charlotte, and we lived on a bus line or streetcar line, I think it was then. Anyway, we would each have $0.25 to go uptown. The movie cost 10 cents, and car fare you could get was 7 cents to and from, so it would cost 14 cents. That would make a big hole in $0.25. So we would walk uptown at age of 9 and go to the movies, and we would go to Nunley's drugstore and get ice cream sodas. And then we each had a nickel left over, so we would get one more ice cream soda and 2 straws, and we would, divide that.
I used to love to go to the movies on Saturday morning, which was my quarter. I could go for a dime, and I'd have a nickel for popcorn and a nickel for a drink, and I was a happy kid. So during that time, and then too, I used to spend a quarter to go to see Central High School football team. That was a big deal. When they played, I always wanted to go see them.
Nobody had any more than anybody else did. You didn't know what you had and what you didn't have. You were just happy. We'd walk to town, we'd take our quarter, we'd go to the movies, go to the state, and then go buy Cresses and get a bag of popcorn. And then you go to the Try and spend the rest of the day and walk home.
We didn't have television back then. We did have radio, and we did have a record player, and we'd have records, and everybody would come in so we could sing and dance, and that was our entertainment. And on Sunday, a group of us would all get together, and we just walked to parks, walked to the swimming pool, and it was a lot of fun. We'd walk downtown. Very few people had cars. And then whenever some of our friends that did have automobiles, they'd come by and pick us up. And we always had just various entertainment and various places to go. We never felt like we were not able to do the things that everybody else did.
We made all of our toys. There was no giving of commercially made equipment. We didn't have that. We made scooters with skate wheels from old skates. We made wagons and to push each other around in and deliver groceries with, and they were made with gears, big old gears from the mill, as wheels. And when you roll them along, they made more noise than a Mack truck does. And we carried stuff in our wagons. We made those. We made all types of games that we played. We had to make up our own stuff and do it, and played out in the street right in front of my house.
Most of our friends had a lot more than we did. Their fathers were well established. They lived in nicer homes, but they all enjoyed coming to our house because it was full of laughter and warmth and good times. And we were always included. We never felt any different.
I hope you have enjoyed these ordinary histories from extraordinary times. Sharing these personal accounts acknowledges and celebrates the value and wisdom of our elders. Their keys to survival and words of advice are unique and at the same time universal.
If you take care of someone and they take care of you, you got it made.
We have always been dedicated to our community, our Greek organizations, and our church. We always wanted to give back what we received from them.
We all knew that money was scarce, but there was still a lot of love. There was still a lot of friendship, and each one helped the other. It wasn't a case of I've got more or I got less. We all shared or tried to help one another, and that's how they survived.
We survived because we all worked together. We each participated in whatever was necessary to have food, to have clothing, and in the whole community, everybody worked together.
It seems to me what you need to do to survive is to realize the possibilities of what you can do with what you've got.
Everybody knew everybody. Kids were well disciplined at the time. And as a result of that, we had established good family values.
I would like to see the community a little bit better place as a result of my having been here.
It has been a wonderful experience to talk about this and to realize that there is so much to share, and I hope that we can pass on to other people that hardships are not something that you do alone by yourself. It's always others to help you. You're not ever alone.
Everyone has a story to tell. Hopefully, we have inspired you to share yours. In those days, with extended families and small communities, neighborhood congregations, everyone was able to look out for one another. Today, it appears that this sense of community is fading. In our transient society, family members may live miles apart, and neighbors and shopkeepers may never know our names. After listening to these personal legacies, I know the best investment I can make is in my family and community. How about you?
To purchase the book, Personal Legacies, Surviving the Great Depression, Charlotte Mecklenburg, 1929 to 1939, contact the CPCC Press at cpccservicescorp.com or call 704-330-6789. You may also purchase this book at the CPCC bookstores on the Central and Levin campuses and in some local bookstores. To purchase a DVD copy of this program, contact WTVI at 704-372-2442 or visit their website at WTVI.org. This program is made possible in part by a grant from the Blumenthal Foundation and also by the Charlotte Museum of History. Also by viewers like you. Thank you.